Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by rockauto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 253. And with us on our Zoom podcast today, we've got three of MotorWeek's finest. Brian Robinson, our two-wheeling reporter and writer of most of the road tests. Brian, welcome.
Hello, and yes, welcome to our Zoom meeting.
And our over the edge reporter, Greg Carlos, who's also the producer of this fiasco.
I miss you and introing our podcast around that weirdly shaped table we always seem to mention.
It's different. And of course, the lady who basically makes everything online click at MotorWeek, our online content coordinator, Jessica Ray.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to interrupt my MotorWeek binge watching session.
You should tell everybody what you're doing.
Okay. So our 40th anniversary show is coming up in a few weeks. And essentially, I am taking a lot of our masters, or most of our masters, are still on physical analog tape, which means that I have to put them in an actual tape deck to watch them in real time. I have so much respect for our editors throughout the years who were editing with tape. But so I've just been binge watching all the oldies and the goodies.
I was going to say, has it made you crazy yet?
Yeah, that's why Benny D is the way he is. So just be careful.
I know. I won't get too enveloped into the whole thing.
Greg's talking about Ben Davis, who produces all of our retro reviews and our marathons. And it's a formidable task, but trust us, folks, the end product, which will show up on your screens in May, will be worth it. At least we hope so. We hope you like it. It's a lot of work that Jessica and everybody else is going to. Okay, I don't envy you. Let's move on, though. It's kind of funny that you even brought that up, because in a way, this is kind of a Back to the Future type of podcast, because the three vehicles we're going to talk about, they're all futuristic, but they all definitely have their roots in previous vehicles or retro style or whatever. And Jessica, I think we're going to start with you. We're going to talk about the revelations we now have about the 2022 GMC HUMMER EV SUV, which will follow up the pickup out in 21. Or out for 21. And so kind of give us an idea of what you're looking at besides that traditional blunt brick Hummer front end.
Well, it's actually a 2024.
Oh, 2024, sorry.
It is 24 model year it's expected in 2023.
And that's so the pickup is 2022.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
The 2023 model year 20 comes out in 2022.
Yeah. Now
it's very confusing. It's so far down the road.
Yeah, neither one is happening anytime soon, but here's some good info.
Yes, and if all things go well, as we know, there's a lot of production issues that have been going on. But yeah, I mean, so if you've seen the Hummer pickup, the Hummer EV looks very similar, but it is 20 inches shorter. Obviously, it doesn't have a bed on it. And personally, I thought the dimensions of the pickup do look a little funky. I think just because, I mean, there's a lot of room for the driver and for the passengers in the back as well. And then you put a bed on the back of that. So the dimensions for the SUV being 20 inches shorter, not having this awkward bed on the back, I think looks very pleasing. It rounds off very nicely. The wheelbase is also a little bit shorter. I mean, I think Hummer did an excellent job of essentially looking at the H1 and the H2 and modernizing it. It's classics. It really is a modern, what you would expect a modern version of it to look like. And it is, so it's not much different from the pickup, truthfully. The specs are really the biggest difference.
Yeah, I mean, it has a little less range, 300 versus 350. What do you
Correct.
two guys think of it?
To Jessica's point about styling, it's like imagine that H2 that everybody knows of, the Hummer, and just imagine if they just chiseled everything and kind of squished something like the grill and everything, and that's what you're looking at. So they fully brought it into the 2020s. I don't know if it appeals to everybody, kind of like the H2 does. It's just I still feel like if you're into Hummers and having the big bad SUV, then you're going to be into it. But I still think it's going to off-put some people, even beyond, throw aside the EV powertrain. I think it's still going to kind of rub some people the wrong way, as most things do.
It's got an awful lot of off-road technology in it. Brian, can you talk to that?
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about. It's got all the tech like the crab walking feature, and just because it's shorter and be better off-road situations. Plus, it gets the benefits of, like we said, it's still quite a few years away. So any benefits that come along that go into pickup, they can put right into that. I think that's a good thing. I think it looks more like the H3 than an H2, which I don't know. It's Hummer-ish, so it's just super pricey. Certainly the first ones that coming out, and then it's like another 3 years down the road until they get to the base models that are like $80,000. The earlier ones are all up around, if not well over 100,000.
Explain to folks that may not be aware of what the crab walk feature is, how that works.
Oh, well, a lot of vehicles have four-wheel steering now. That's not necessarily new, but with this one, it's just really exaggerated. And with having the motors back there, you can, when you turn the wheels to the right, the rear wheels also turn, I'm not sure the percentage, but a decent amount also right. And you can almost go parallel, like around an object. And super helpful off-road, and even in town if you're trying to parallel park or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of aimed at off-roading still, but like the whole, and we talked about this with the F-150, almost like disaster relief, because it has an onboard generator that you could charge other cars with. So I mean, add that in with how big and rugged it is, the crab walk, and I mean, you can go into tornado, hurricane areas, and like it could actually do some real good. I mean, if whoever agency can afford it, first of all.
Only thing that worries me is, it's several years away. And at this point, they're still talking about 300 miles of range. I must say I was expecting more. Now, maybe it'll be more by the time it gets here. But what worries me is that usually a good size SUV like that, people want to take for long distance trips, and you're really not going to be able to do that. I mean, they're even talking about putting charging stations next to trailheads and stuff. I mean, you're talking about a lot of power in places where there is no power. So I don't know, or very little.
They're going to have to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, they're going to have to beef up that 800 volt infrastructure, because that seems like what all the new EVs are really kind of banking on. They're 400 volt compatible, but ideally it's 800 volt. And that's going to be to where you can stop for like a half hour and get quite a bit of range.
Yeah.
If it tows like 8,000 pounds, I'd be all aboard for having like an 8,000 pound accessory battery you could pull behind. And
Well, John, what is interesting too is Chevy recently announced that they're going to use the GM Ultium platform to build a Silverado.
Yes.
And they are expecting the Silverado to get a 400-mile range. So
yeah, I wondered about that too, and I'm figuring that maybe that says something about weight. I don't know, or maybe that's
potentially.
It could be. But yeah, they did make, and that was like made within days of when they talked about this EV SUV. So
I'm excited to drive this thing. I mean, it should be awesome.
It should be.
To road test this thing. I'm really excited. Hopefully I'm still around in 2023.
I certainly hope you will be. Hope we all are. Let's go to our second vehicle, and we're actually going to head down to Brian on the screen now. The 2022 Toyota GR86, quote unquote, all new. What is it? What's all new about it? Take it away.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the 86 is the platform made with the Subaru BRZ and began life as the Scion FRS back when Scion was a thing. The biggest thing
Right.
it has going for it is just a super lightweight, low to the ground, rear wheel drive, inexpensive sports car, things we constantly hear no one makes anymore. Well, they do make
Right.
it, just not many people buy it. It's always looked fantastic. I think it's got the two-door coupe, obviously a chunky rear, but
Real
not
long
flashy. Correct, but not flashy really. Kind of conservative looking, less hot roddy than the Supra, if you will. The biggest change, it has gotten a little bit bigger with the new one. Not much, a little bit heavier. The front end is the biggest difference. The current one has like a ginormous mouth to it. The whole front end is like a mouth. The newer one, it's smaller. The front end, the body kind of wraps around a little more. I think it's a much better look. They added the GR to it like they did with the Supra to give the Gazoo Racing guys some props for putting it all together. The biggest knock has always been the amount of power that it has. I wouldn't say it's underpowered, but it's not a car that's going to get away from you. And it's certainly it's more than 6 seconds to 60, which that's an eternity for anything you want to call a sports car. So they did address that. It's got a little bump in horsepower. I think maybe 30 more horsepower or so, but it's still only like 230 some. We're not sure on the exact specs because this one, the one they showed was the Japanese spec version. Not sure if we'll get the same one or not. Anyway, ton of fun. Looks better than ever. You still get a manual, which is great, and it's a good manual too. It's just one of those cars that, you know, is it more fun to drive a fast car slow or a slow car fast? And this is certainly the slow car fast category.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Robinson nailed it right there. It's with the previous FRS, became 86, and the BRZ. With distance, I always found myself kind of thinking it wasn't as good as it is, because you start looking at the numbers again, you're like, oh man, it needs like 50 more horsepower. But every time I got back into one, it was like, man, this thing's fun. And that just speaks to the fact that it's so light, it's so well balanced. The previous one, of course, it just doesn't need that much power to have fun, especially when you pair it with a manual transmission. So there's a little bit more of a power bump here. I suspect that won't be, I don't think that's going to throw it into a new power category. I think it's still just going to be the fun to throw around and not be too scared to do so, because, you know, it was always a pretty controllable car.
Really sounds like we're talking about the Miata too, in a way, you know, except with a hardtop. You know, it's fun, but no power. Jessica.
Well, you know, a lot of people, I read the comments and they're always wanting manual transmissions in cars where manual transmissions are not available. And there are these select few vehicles that are still being made with a manual transmission. And it is not a Blackwing, which is going to cost you a small fortune. These are affordable, well, quote unquote affordable, as you know, many. We were talking about this recently, but that, you know, new cars, the average price is about $40,000 these days. But anything under that, I could be considered quote unquote affordable. So you know, these are small, lightweight vehicles that are fun to drive with a manual transmission. I don't really know that you can ask for too much more in sort of the vehicle climate today, truthfully.
And it's not huge. You know, it's like we were just talking on a shoot the other day, Jessica mentioned it. You know, when you get into something smaller, you know, than some of these big behemoth SUVs we test, like a BRZ or this or a Mini Cooper or something, you're enveloped with the car. And I look at this GR86 as one of those cars that you almost wear, and it makes you feel much more intimate with the car and the road. And that, I think that's where the fun factor comes in, a lot of it, just feeling like you're connected. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to, I guess, the most futuristic and in some ways, look anyway, although I think it still looks like it's been around a long time, the 2021 Karma GS-6. Greg, this car's got a heck of a history. Kind of fill us in on what it is and what it was before and where it's going.
So Karma sounds familiar. If it does sound familiar to you, it's because it was originally the name of a car under the Fisker brand, Hendrik Fisker, who designed some very beautiful cars, made a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle back early part of the 2010s, I think 2012, I think is when this one came out roughly. BR2, you might actually have a better idea.
I was just going to say, back when we had to explain to people what plug-in hybrids were.
Yeah,
exactly. So now I'll save some of the details, but Fisker is gone. He has moved to, he still has a company named Fisker, but the car, the design, everything remained with the new company that rose from the ashes, which is Karma. It went on from there, if you're still with me, to be named the Revero. So again, same car, same platform. They tweaked some styling, but a new name. Now here we are in 2021. We have the GS-6, part of the GS lineup. Still basically the same car, more tweaks, a little bit to the powertrain in terms of modernizing it, giving it some more EV range. But here we have like I said, the GS6, which we recently drove, not fully electric yet. Karma will be fully electric with the GS-6. So that'll be coming down the road and should be 300 miles roughly EV range. But back to the car we actually drove. So this one, like I said, is just a beautiful, gorgeous Fisker design. It's got that Grand Tourer style cab backwards, really, really long front end. It is a 4-door though. You can get, and I did get a couple of people in the back seat, but they don't have a lot of room to play around. So it's very
almost
much
a 2+2. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's a 2+2. But I probably got more looks driving around in this thing than I have in Corvettes and any number of cars that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which this one actually did reach the $100,000 mark. So the GS6 will now start at 86 grand. The Revero, which they still have, same basic design, this is getting confusing, moves more upscale. So that's the more expensive one. But as far as, what the car is, as I mentioned, it is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which means you can plug it in. You can get up to about 60 miles of EV driving, and that's purely electric. The engine won't kick in, even up at highway speeds. But if you run out of battery power or you're in a different mode, it has 3 different driving modes, you can use it as a traditional hybrid. But a traditional hybrid as in how the Volt works, where the engine, which is a BMW sourced i3, actually just acts as a generator. Right. So it just powers the battery, which then powers the 2 rear motors, making it a rear-wheel drive car with power to each wheel individually. Total system output is about 530 horsepower, 550 pound-feet of torque. So it's not like 911 turbo quick, but it's still around 4.5 seconds to 60. And when you have that full battery charge, I mean, it's instant, which is really cool. That's reason enough to keep the battery charged, not necessarily just to drive around on battery power alone. I mean, you get some real performance advantages.
Really kind of, you're right. You hit the nail on the head, though. It has that classic Grand Touring look, really long nose. Even the interior is pretty classic looking with the round vents. And, it I guess in a way, it really doesn't look very futuristic. But anyone else?
Yeah, I would just say classic, dated, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't. The original when it came out, it kind of blew me away just because it was so different. But there's a lot of cars now that have the same kind of lines to it, which they may have copied it. That's fine, but it looks okay. Now I wish them the best. Now's a great time for new brands to get out there when we're making this transition from traditional gas-powered cars to EVs. Really, it's an open book at this point. You can pretty much put anything out there with a battery and should be able to sell a few of them. And it's not, to me, it's not outrageously priced certainly for as unique as it is.
And I think that the quality there is too, and from the interior, I thought it was great. You kind of expect these small car companies to have to cut corners. It seems like they put a lot of effort now that it's kind of been the same car moving forward for almost a decade now. But it's absolutely comparable to what you would see in a Mercedes, BMW, any of the major luxury brands.
Jessica, any closing thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like the look. I actually saw an original Fisker, a Karma Fisker, or Fisker Karma.
Fisker Karma.
Fisker Karma.
It's confusing.
An original one just a couple of weeks ago driving around. And I thought it aged pretty well. So I know that obviously there has been some tweaks to it on the exterior to keep it more modern. But no, I mean, I think it looks very nice.
Nice to drive too. I don't think I even mentioned that. It's
No, you didn't. But yeah, we should talk about how it was to drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's low. It's not not necessarily a performance car, like something I'd want to take to the track, but it drives great on the highway.
Grand Tour.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, really happy with how it drove at speed, at highway speeds, that is. It's quiet on the inside, and I like being able, so it has paddle shifters, but they're not shifters. They're just paddles to control the amount of regenerative braking and the drive mode, like stealth mode, and then you can go into like a sport mode and somewhere in between. But I mean, when you go to stealth mode, that's exactly what it is. I mean, if you have the battery power, it'll silently cruise for, I mean, I had at least of the 60 miles it says it can get, I was well into the 50s.
Wow. Interesting car, interesting times, and a lot more EVs coming, especially if the Biden administration plan for infrastructure goes through. And that's our lightning round question today. Everybody probably knows there's been a $2 trillion infrastructure plan that's been floated, and it's going to address, among other things, but it's also going to be focusing quite a bit of money, about 174 million, to boost electric vehicles with rebates and more charging stations, and that big thing about charging stations. And by the way, those of you that are seeing drop out today, it's also going to address some of the high-speed internet situations across the country. So, but anyway, let's forget about the money right now and really look at the core things that both today and future. Should this kind of bill be focused on the here and now and repairing roads, repairing the bridges, or should it be looking in the future and spend more of its time looking at battery charging and electrical infrastructure? With that, I'll hush. And so what do you think?
The easy answer is probably the roads, because if there are no roads and bridges to drive on, what's the point of electrifying cars? But I'll take the other way and say that I think we need to really start focusing, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever it is down the road, because, the climate issue is not going to go away. We have to actively try to get off of fossil fuels. And as maybe, too forward thinking as it seems now, I don't see it that way at all. I think you really have to start looking sometimes decades down the road.
Yeah, I don't know why it has to be one or the other. We certainly, as big as the bill is, there's room for both in there. And I don't, without getting into political discussion, I just wish we would have a bill that addressed one thing instead of calling it one thing and addressing 74 other things. That would appeal to me anyway, but that's neither here nor there. If I had to choose one, I would go with the EV infrastructure so that I could buy a Hummer EV SUV, and then I wouldn't really need roads at that point. So.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Jessica, your 2 cents.
Well, it's really interesting because looking through some of our old seasons, we were certainly very well aware of alternate fuel vehicles, which is what we used to call them, AFVs. I guess you could still technically call them that. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of 50-50 on it, mostly just because I've seen a lot of really, really awful roads. And I'm sure we all know somebody who's had maybe a vehicle wrecked due to bad roads. I know certainly I've driven along the notorious BW Parkway, which is essentially one of the few ways to get from our side, Baltimore, to DC. And traffic is always bad there because of, potholes in the roads. And to me, that was the first time I'd ever seen like traffic. Like, it wasn't because there was a lot of cars on the road. It was because the roads were so awful. So I think it has to be both, because obviously EVs and their infrastructure, EVs, rebates, making sure people can buy them. Although we've seen a lot of EVs starting to come down in price, getting much closer to what you would probably buy a typical car for, getting close to there. I mean, Audi just came out with the Q4. We just heard about that the other day. I think it was actually just yesterday, the Q4 e-tron. And that's supposed to start under $45,000 without any tax incentives. So there's available options, but yeah, definitely getting them to people is important.
Another way to think about the actual road infrastructure problem is getting cars off of it, which, as we've seen during the pandemic, is there's quite a few people who can work from home very competently, maybe even more so than coming into an office. And people who want to work from home and who can work from home should be able to, and that keeps a lot of people off the roads and a lot of money out of having to fix roads.
And that money should go into fixing our internet system across the country. I don't know about you, but even this podcast today, it's really dropping in and out a lot. So we apologize if you're missing every fifth word of what we're saying. All right, it's very interesting comments from all of you, and very good, well-made points. We've got a viewer talking about technology right now. A viewer question from Kai. And here, I'll read it verbatim off the sheet. I'm having trouble understanding, and you're not alone, Kai, understanding the difference between lane departure warning that's on many new cars today and lane keeping assist. Can you help me out? What's the difference and which is better?
Yeah, so I mean, the key words in both of those phrases, you have warning and you have assist. So for lane departure warning, it's going to give you an audio cue. It's probably going to give you a visual cue. If you have a head-up display, they even have the cues in the head-up display, or you might see it right on your dash. So it's only going to tell you that you're moving sort of out of a lane. Whereas the lane keeping assist, that will actually, you'll feel likely a jolt in your steering wheel. It'll probably steer for you a little bit automatically to keep you in the lane. It might even brake for you. So they're two very different programs. Whether I certainly am not the biggest fan of lane keeping assist, but
why? Tell us why.
I don't like it on. I like it on highways, don't like it on 2-lane roads, mostly just because it's very touchy. It is touchy sometimes. But I will say this, that we have older viewers who are interested in in something like lane keeping assist and these options, these safety features in their vehicles, just because I think, as you get older, you get a little bit, more fearful driving, like in certain
Careful.
Yeah, I was waiting for her to say that was handled very well.
Hey, I wear glasses. I understand, not being able to, or just even being a little scared driving in certain conditions at night, in the rain. So I totally, I completely understand that. And a lot of people like having that safety of something like lane keeping assist or some of these driver assistance features to make sure that, they're driving as safely as possible.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I kind of admittedly turn all of them off when I get into cars. I because at this point I've driven so many of them and I know what they do. I don't feel like I have to, unless there's a major update to one, or maybe one uses braking or something. I know what they do and I just don't like them. That's just my feelings on it. Maybe I'm not safe. I don't know, but I've driven many miles without them and I've been doing okay.
Ryan,
Yep. Nothing I could add. That was very comprehensive overview.
yeah, I will. I just spent a year driving a Hyundai Palisade with actually both systems. And, initially I was very annoyed on even interstates with it tugging at the wheel. It had basically, the lane keep assist was dominant. After it warned you, it would go into action. Finally, after about 8 or 9 months, I recognized that the real safety aspect of it was if you are driving on long distances and it's boring and your mind starts to wander, you just can't help it. It's just the mile after mile. That when you would get to a slight turn in the road, because interstates usually don't have sharp turns, you would feel that tug and it would bring your attention back to the road, which was a safe thing. Now it's bad for me that my mind was drifting, but it's good for me that there was something that was giving me a subtle, tap on the head. Hey, pay attention, stupid. So I actually had a grudging respect for it. Huh?
Is that what it says?
No, it's probably what it should say if you really were being un-PC. But so it has its value, and I have to admit, as the oldest person in this little forum today, it's probably has its real advantages for people that are getting up in years. But it is a safety thing. But I have to also say that every test car we get in, if someone else has been from the staff's been in it, the systems have been turned off. So
I'll say this.
All right.
Like I said, I don't generally use the lane departure warning or the lane keeping assist, but all it takes is one time for it to save you, to make you a believer, because it's happened with forward collision warning for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even because I wasn't paying attention. It was just because it reacted so quickly and it hit the brakes, which even like I said, I was still paying attention, but I was in control of the car. But after I realized and calmed down what had happened, it's such a great piece of technology, because there's just so often so many people aren't paying attention. And I'm not going to comment on how many people don't pay attention, but it's ultimately it is a good thing. The systems are a good thing, and they're only going to get better.
And we should point out that the systems only activate when you are doing something unsafe,
right,
which is drifting out of your lane.
I've never experienced one that did it when it shouldn't do it. I mean, granted, I would like some to give me a little bit more leeway, but it's never just done it out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think sometimes I've noticed every Kia that we get into, they have the forward collision assist in it, and a lot of times, and maybe this just speaks maybe to just how I drive, which I know is not how a lot of other people drive. I'm a pretty defensive driver. I'm always anticipating somebody making the wrong move. And so occasionally the front collision assist would pop on of something I was 100% aware of. I knew I was slowing down, but I wasn't slowing down as quick as the car wanted me to. So I think, sometimes these things will come on and it'll just remind me, okay, I'm aware of things that are going on, and so is the car, and then I sort of makes me feel good about other people who might not be as in tune when they're driving, because I certainly have met people who are not as what's a good word, passionate or even just confident in their driving as myself. So Competent. Yeah, competent. Yeah, that's probably the best word. So yeah.
Thank you all. Kai, I hope that answered your question. Warning is warning, and the lane keeping assist is an active safety system. Before we wrap things up for good, any rant and raves from anybody?
I just want to revisit one about I've been a staunch, I guess I can't think of the proper word right now. Anyway, I don't like when people pull through parking spaces in a busy parking lot. And I want everybody to know I've softened. It's okay in certain situations, not every situation, but if you safely do it, I'm okay with it. But
why don't you like that? What is that? I've remind everybody of what the real bug is for you.
Because especially if there's more than one or two cars in the area of, let's say, the 4 square of spaces, I've seen it happen, and it's happened to me where somebody pulls through and somebody else is pulling in. There's no line of sight if there are other cars. So somebody could be pulling through a parking space when somebody's trying to pull into that parking space. And I think that could be eliminated by just not doing it. If there's nobody around, whatever, I don't care. But just if you're going to do it, you got to be super careful. But what I will rally against this time is people who will cross spaces, not even getting into a space or out of a space just to get to another lane.
Right.
Like that's just like, come on, man, just go around. And it's like, I've seen like 3 or 4 lanes of parking spots. They'll just go so they can make a beeline to a parking spot that somebody's pulling out of, and they'll wait for like 2 minutes.
It is unsafe.
I just want everybody to know I've softened. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Greg. I mean, parking lots are so dangerous. I mean, I drive a vehicle that doesn't have a backup camera in it. So whenever I'm in a test car that has a backup camera, it's like a saving grace. I mean, holy moly, has it changed the game. I feel so much safer backing out of somewhere in a very busy parking lot. Now, of course, making sure I'm also looking around while using the camera as well. Camera is more of a it should be secondary. But yeah, no, I agree with you, Greg.
I was more comfortable driving on the Autobahn at 150 miles per hour by myself for the first time I've ever been in Germany, not knowing where I'm going. I felt safer there than I do in any parking lot. I'm not exaggerating.
I think that's true. I think you are. All right, I'm going to wrap things up because I don't know about you, but my internet keeps going in and out. Thanks, everybody. Jessica, Greg, Brian, thanks, everybody out there for listening and watching our podcast today. To Jim Bigwood, our audio engineer that makes sure we come through loud and clear every week. Greg, of course, our producer, and Bob Mixter, who invented this whole idea in the first place. Thanks to all of you. Be sure to catch MotorWeek on your local public television station. If you don't know where, go to the motorweek.org website, hit up the button that says about the show. You can put in your zip code and find the local air times. Also over on our Motor Trend cable partner on Tuesday nights, new shows show up every week. And of course on youtube.com/MotorWeek, you can see everything we've done, past, present, and almost future. To everybody out there, thanks very much for joining us, and thanks one and all for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by rockauto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.